Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the crowded infirmaries and dusty apothecaries of medieval Europe, where healers did not have antibiotics, painkillers, or MRI machines but relied on bloodletting, leeches, and prayers to cure the sick. Forget the gentle potions and soothing salves you see in modern reenactments. The real story is about donkey dung poultices, worming out pests from festering wounds, and doctors prescribing live spiders as medicine. So tonight we ask what strange remedies medieval people actually trusted to heal their bodies. What did it feel like to swallow powdered mummy bone or have heated irons pressed against your flesh in the name of health? Every treatment came with a price, but it also shows remarkable creativity and hope in the face of illness. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who's joining this journey into the curious past. Now dim the lights, pull your blanket close, and let's explore the strangest medical treatments of medieval people together. You sit in a crowded barber shop, where the same man who trims your beard also fixes broken bones and treats fevers. The air smells of stale hair, spilled ale, and a metallic tang that makes your nostrils flare. You've come here because the physician back home has no cure for the pounding in your temples. The barber surgeon smiles at you, dips a slender blade in vinegar, and slaps it across your palm. The pain is sharp and quick. You barely notice it as you lean back and feel a thin river of warm blood spill into a waiting bowl. This is bloodletting, a cure believed to restore balance when the humors in your body ran wild. Your blood is too hot or too full, so the barber lets it flow until you feel lighter. You do not ask why you must lose what keeps you alive. You only know that after the bleeding you will sleep again, and your head will stop throbbing. The barber wraps your arm with a strip of cloth and hands you a cloth to press when it bleeds too fast. You dab at the wet fabric and taste the salt on your lips. Other patients wait on wooden stools, arms extended, trading their vitality for relief. One man grimaces as the barber presses leeches onto his chest. They latch on like tiny monsters, sucking until they grow fat. Their bellies glow with your red essence. Barber surgeons were once simple barbers who cut hair and pulled teeth. Over time, they picked up knives and saws and learned the art of surgery. They set broken limbs and sewed wounds with the same steady hand that guided a razor across a neck. Medicine was rare and expensive, but barbers traveled with armies, serving soldiers on battlefields and nobles in court. They carried leather pouches filled with leeches, vials of blood letting cups and sharp blades. You might visit one hoping for a cure, or stumble upon one in a small town when illness left you too weak to travel. You hear the hum of voices as you lean back further. The barber talks of balance, of hot and cold blood and wet and dry elements. You swallow the explanation with a nod. It makes sense here in this dim shop where every cut and pinch is the remedy for 1,000 ailments. He tells you that a little pain now can mean health later, and that if he does not draw enough, you will still carry the sickness deep in your veins. You count the seconds as you watch the bowl fill. Your pulse slows. Your chest feels lighter. You wonder if this is relief or just another kind of suffering. A man beside you thanks the barber when the bleeding stops. He stands shakily and cradles his arm. You will walk from this place feeling unsteady, but alive. Outside the shop, you pause in the bright sunlight. You taste the air and marvel at its freshness. Your head no longer pounds. The ache in your jaw from grinding teeth during the fever is gone. You bought a new lease on health with nothing more than a few cuts and a little bleeding. In the weeks that follow, you hear stories of other treatments. Cups heated until they hiss over skin, drawing blood upward through suction. Leeches prized for their tiny bite and uncanny appetite. Pouches of herbs tied around the arm to seal wounds. You realize that every town has its own remedies, but they all share the same belief: health depends on the flow of blood. Not everyone trusted barbers. Some preferred monks or physicians who studied ancient texts. Others used charms and amulets blessed by priests. But for most people, the barber surgeon was the only doctor they could afford or find. They answered distress calls at any hour and worked by torchlight in cramped rooms. Their tools were simple but effective. Their knowledge was practical and earned by experience rather than theory. You return to that barber shop once more, this time for a persistent cough. The barber examines your chest, feels along your ribs, then makes a small incision near your elbow. You flinch, but remain still. The blood trickles out. He applies a leech and watches as it fills. He promises that once the excess is gone, your cough will ease and your lungs will clear. He is right. Within days, you breathe more easily. You think of the long road home and wonder how many cures lie at the end of a blade. You marvel at the skill of these men who made barbers and surgeons one and the same. Centuries later, we look back and wince at the simplicity of bloodletting. We have pills and scans and sterile rooms. We do not blame those who traded a little blood for relief. They faced illness with the tools they had and found hope in the flow of red life. The barber surgeon may seem strange now, but in his hands people found comfort, balance, and a chance to see another sunrise. As you journey on, remember this: healing may require sacrifice. Sometimes it is not enough to fight pain with soothing words. Sometimes you must bleed a little to live a lot. In the medieval world, that was the greatest gift a barber surgeon could offer. You rise early the next morning and follow the barber surgeon into his workroom. The walls are lined with jars of herbs and glass vials of colored liquids that glint in the candlelight. The air smells faintly of lavender and vinegar. This morning, you are no longer a stranger in his chair. You have come to see how he prepares his instruments and why he trusts them with lives. He holds up a metal cup shaped like a bell. It is small and smooth and catches your gaze. He explains that he will heat it over the flame until it glows red. Then he places it upside down on your forearm. The heat forms a vacuum as it cools. The skin rises into the cup and a collection of blood follows. You feel a strange tug beneath your skin. It is not painful. It is curious. You watch new bruises bloom, circles of dark red that will fade in days. He rotates the cups across your back and chest, repeating the process. Each time he does this, he murmurs the reason: cold humors lodged beneath your muscles from sleepless nights or poor diet. Removing them brings warmth and vigor back into your body. After cupping, he circles a blade around your thumb to squeeze a tiny drop of blood. He catches it on a scrap of linen and shades it from the light. He inspects the color. This too is a form of diagnosis. Dark blood means slow circulation. Bright red means the humors are balanced. His notes will guide further treatment. You are amazed at how calm you feel. The pounding headache you awoke with has faded, and your shoulders feel looser. The ritual of cutting and cupping seems to bring order to the chaos in your limbs. He moves on to leeches. He dips them into a basin of water until they stir and slide across his palm. He carries them to your chest and lets them attach with a gentle kiss. The leeches cling with surprising strength and begin to feed. You watch their slender bodies swell with your blood. It is both repulsive and fascinating. You realize that these tiny creatures have become vital allies. As the leeches finish, he collects them in a jar of salt water. They detach with a small jerk. He rinses the bites and applies a powder of dried yarrow and crushed mint leaves. He presses it gently onto your skin and wraps a light bandage. He assures you that the herbs will soothe any lingering pain and prevent infection. You leave the shop feeling not drained but enlivened. Your steps are steadier. Your mind feels sharper. You marvel at how drawing a little blood can spark so much relief. Over the next week, you observe how other patients fare. A woman with persistent fever returns to her home in the village, her cheeks rosy again after repeated sessions of cupping and leeching. A farmer with a swollen knee learns that careful bleeding above the joint eases the inflammation and allows him to walk without pain. You see children who once flinched at the sight of a blade sit quietly for minor bloodletting and even giggle at the tickle when a leech attaches. The barber surgeon shares stories as he works. He tells you how his master taught him to balance courage with precision and how every cut must be measured. Too much blood leads to weakness. Too little may leave the malady within. He speaks of the ancient texts he studies between clients, of scholars who debated how many times a year one should bleed, or the best seasons for drawing veins. You learn that medical wisdom is a blend of experience and tradition passed down from healers who trusted practice as much as theory. One afternoon you meet an old knight. His armor hangs from a peg and his face is marked with lines of age and battle. He came from a nearby castle seeking help for chronic gout. The barber examines his swollen foot and decides on a series of light bloodlettings along the calf. The knight grits his teeth through the first cut, but says it reminds him of wounds earned in war. By the third session, he can walk without favoring his foot. He claps the barber on the shoulder and calls him a warrior in his own right. You begin to understand why people returned for these treatments despite the pain and the sight of blood. The relief that followed was real. And in an age without pills or cleanliness, the razor and leech were the closest things to medicine available. On market day, you accompany the barber to the square. He sets up a simple stall with a sign painted in bold strokes. Locals approach with ailments both small and dire. He offers a quick bleed for headaches, a leech for fever, a cup for swelling. Word of mouth spreads. He is not just a barber, he is a healer, a keeper of balance. You watch a child refuse to let the cup touch her arm. She trembles and cries. You kneel beside her and offer your hand. You show her the small red circles left on your back and tell her they are badges of bravery. She nods, uncertainly, and consents. Before you know it, she is smiling, clutching a handful of fresh cloth strips to replace the ones smeared with your blood. That night, you reflect on what you have witnessed. Bloodletting may sound barbaric now, but it brought comfort to those who suffered. It restored energy when fevers left bodies weak. It eased pain when nothing else worked. You realize that healing begins with hope. The patient must believe in the remedy, and in the hands of a skilled barber-surgeon, belief became healing. You will leave this place with scarred arms and newfound respect for those who wielded sharp blades and leeches in the name of health. You understand that blood was once the language of the body, and the barber was its translator. As you drift to sleep that evening, you recall how your own arms felt lighter, how your thoughts cleared. You drift with the promise of a better morning, and you know that in a world without modern cures, these strange practices saved lives. You step into a shaded courtyard where the air smells of damp earth and flowering herbs. The sound of water, trickling in stone troughs, lulls you as a monk kneels beside a shallow pool teeming with dark, writhing shapes. These are leeches, tiny living syringes that medieval healers prized as cures for fever, pain, and imbalance. You watch as the monk scoops one up in a cup and holds it by its tail. Its body stretches like a living rope before snapping back into a spiral. Monastic gardens were more than places of prayer. They were living pharmacies. Walls sheltered raised beds of lavender, sage, and mint. Narrow channels of clear spring water wound between them. Here leeches multiplied in peace. The monks understood that clean water and mild temperature produced healthy leeches ready for harvest. You see rows of jars labeled by date with leeches that have fed and those fasting for weeks. Each jar holds a different strength of these little doctors. The monk carries the cup into the infirmary, a low stone room where sick villagers lie waiting. Your heart pounds as you follow, imagining what comes next. The monk sets the cup on a wooden table and picks up a leech with a pair of iron tweezers. You cringe but do not look away. He examines it, checks its head for damage, and then presses it to the red welt on a patient's arm. The leech attaches with a soft suction. You hear a faint rippling as it draws blood. The patient closes her eyes and breathes more easily already. You kneel beside the woman and ask why she trusts such a creature. She smiles and says that when she felt trapped by fever, she begged God for relief. The leech felt like a miracle sent in a wise man's hands. She tells you that after the leech fills itself, the fever breaks and the pain in her joints fades. She calls the leech a small blessing and thanks the monk for his gentle touch. Across the room, a knight with a stiff knee waits his turn. He wears a faded surcoat and grips a wooden crutch. The monk comes to him next and places 2 leeches above and below the knee. The knight grimaces but stands still. He grips the table edge until the leeches grow heavy. When the beasts fall away on their own, the monk inspects the spots and ties them gently with a clean strip of linen. The knight nods grimly and walks out with a soft click of armor and renewed hope for walking without pain. Afterwards, you follow the monk back to the garden. He carries a small basket of used leeches and drops them into a trough fed by fresh spring water. You ask if they die after feeding. He shakes his head. He explains that leeches can feed many times if cared for in water that stays clean and cool. He scoops handfuls of moss and places it near the water's edge for them to hide. You marvel at the thought of these tiny creatures living under the care of monks, multiplying quietly in the shade, ready to heal the next suffering soul. The monk leads you to a sunlit patch of mint and shows you a simple remedy. He crushes leaves between his fingers and mixes the juice with water. He dips a strip of linen into the mixture and places it over a small incision on his own arm. You see a faint stream of blood and feel a shiver. He smiles and says that mint cools the skin, prevents infection, and soothes pain while the leeches work their magic elsewhere. He invites you to try planting leeches yourself. You hesitate, but the monk hands you a glass jar and a tiny paddle. You scoop water from the pool and guide a leech into its new home. It glides across the glass, searching for escape. You cover the jar and place it among dozens of others. You feel a mix of pride and discomfort at hosting this living remedy. The monk pats your shoulder and says that caring for leeches is caring for health itself. As afternoon light filters through the leaves, you learn that leech gardens were carefully guarded. Local healers brought only the sickest patients to the monastery because each leech was precious. To collect them, monks sometimes waded into slow-moving streams, carrying bowls of fresh blood to lure the leeches out of the mud. You imagine the patience it took to wait for the tiny suckers to emerge by the dozen, crawling across boots into waiting hands. The monk shows you the jars again. He holds one labeled the 4th day of June and explains that the patient who bled last week will return tomorrow for another session. He says that timing matters. Too soon, and the humors will be unbalanced. Too late, and the cures lose their strength. You nod, realizing how precise this ancient practice was, even without modern science. He leads you to the herb plots and lets you pull a handful of violet petals. He crushes them and blends them with honey. He offers you a taste. The flavor is sweet and floral. He explains that violet honey was used after leeching to help blood clots form gently and prevent further bleeding. You feel gratitude for this small kindness after the sharp sting of surgery and the slow draw of blood. As you leave the garden, you notice the quiet of the place. Only the rustle of leaves and the faint drip of water. You feel calmer than you have in weeks. You taste the memory of mint and honey in your mouth and understand that healing is more than removing disease. It is restoring peace to the body and mind. That evening you rest in a straw mattress, your arm bandaged, your head clear. You dream of running water and green leaves, and tiny leeches slurping in perfect silence. You dream of hands that work miracles with nothing more than patience and understanding of nature's balance. In the days that follow, you share what you learned with friends back home. They laugh at tales of blood-sucking worms until they feel relief from headaches, swelling, and fatigue. You return once more to the garden, harvesting herbs and watching leeches with a new respect. You know that modern medicine may laugh at these treatments now, but the wisdom of those medieval healers lives on in the simple trust they placed in living cures. As you drift to sleep that night, you hold on to the lesson of the leech garden. Healing is a partnership between patient and practitioner, nature and nurture, blood and balm. You realize that sometimes the smallest creature can bring the greatest relief, and that hope often blooms in shaded waters under monastic stones. You wake long before dawn to tend the leech garden again. The air is cool and mist laces through the stone walls. You carry a wooden bucket of fresh spring water and a small basket of moss. Your task is to move the leeches from their holding pools into shallow trenches lined with soft clay. The trenches wind between rows of lavender and chamomile, so the creatures can rest in a calm place once fed. You crouch by the first trench and tilt the bucket. A handful of leeches slide out with slow grace and vanish beneath the moss. You feel their soft bodies wriggle beneath your fingers. Once hidden, they will fast until afternoon when patients arrive. During their fast, they shed toxins and remain strong for the next treatment. You cover them carefully and move on. The monk master appears and shows you a new technique. He dips a glass vial into the trench and places its mouth against the water. Then he lifts, and the leech climbs into the sterile bottle to escape direct handling. He praises the method for keeping the leeches healthy and clean. You try it yourself. The leech feels cold against the glass but coils without fuss. You release it gently near the next trench and nod in understanding of this gentle care. Later, a patient arrives at the garden gate. She is a young woman with a fever that has left her face pale and her voice weak. The monk leads her to a bench under an apple tree. You follow, carrying a clean cloth and a cup of leeches. The air is scented with blossoms and the soft rustle of early birds. It is the most peaceful place you have ever treated a sick person. The monk places a cup beneath the woman's elbow and tips in 2 leeches. You hold her wrists steady as the creatures attach. She flinches at first, then closes her eyes and breathes through the slow tickle. The pain is mild in comparison to the fever that has burned through her nights. You offer a bowl of lavender tea while she waits. The warm liquid soothes her throat as she watches the leeches with fascination. After 20 minutes, the leeches have fed and grown plump. They slide off on their own. The monk collects them in a separate cup of salt water. He examines the bite marks, then presses fresh mint poultice onto the spots. You help wrap them with cloth and tie them loosely so that healing can begin without infection. The woman smiles with relief and thanks both of you. You feel proud that these simple creatures and your hands brought comfort. Back in the garden, you tidy the trays of leeches. You notice one that seems weak. Its body is pale and limp. You place it in a small jar of blood, diluted with herb water. The monk explains that sometimes leeches exhaust themselves or get infected. They must be revived with fresh blood and gentle heat before they can serve again. You set a lantern nearby to keep the water warm and promise to check on it later. You walk among the herbs and pick sprigs of rosemary and thyme for burning. The smoke keeps stray insects away and freshens the air. You find a small patch of plantain and crush its leaves into a paste. You plan to apply it to any leech bites that sting too much. Plantain has a cooling property that soothes irritated skin and prevents swelling. A group of villagers arrives with symptoms of gout and joint pain. The monk greets each of them and writes notes in his ledger. He reminds you that record keeping is vital. Each jar of leeches and each treatment time must be logged. You follow him back to the infirmary and watch as he numbers each patient's cup and places it on a shelf. This discipline ensures no mistakes and shows how seriously monks took their craft. You return alone to the trench where your weak leech waits. It stirs when you approach. You gently coax it from the water with a twig and place it in a new jar of clear blood. You close your eyes and imagine the warmth flowing into its body. You promise to nurse it back to strength. You understand that these creatures save lives, but also need saving themselves. By midday, the garden is busy again. Monks and lay brothers gather herbs and prepare salves. A small boy carries oak bark to a mortar and pestle. He grinds it into a powder for sealing wounds after leeching. The mail for the sick includes instructions for rest and baths of rosewater to refresh the spirit. Healing is never just one step. It is an entire ritual of mind, body, and soul. You pause by a fountain and cup water to your lips. You taste the cool purity and think of the spring that feeds it deep in the hills. You feel grateful for this moment of calm. Beyond the garden walls, the world is harsh and uncertain. Here there is purpose and care. Even medieval medicine, with its oddities, shows a deep respect for life and nature's balance. As afternoon wanes, you lead the injured leech back to its favored trench. It empties its belly easily and slips beneath the moss with renewed vigor. You smile at its resilience and think of how many people have thrived thanks to its small bite. You sweep the paths and gather fallen petals, reflecting on how hope can be found in the smallest forms of life. At dusk, you join the monks for vespers in the chapel. Your hands are stained but clean of blood and dirt. You kneel among them and feel a sense of gratitude. You pray softly for those you have treated and for the leeches who served them. You thank them both for the gift of relief. That night, you dream of the garden, of clear water trickling, of green herbs brushing your skin, of gentle creatures waiting to bring balance back to a broken body. You know that in a world without modern cures, leeches were more than bloodsuckers. They were partners in healing, a testament to medieval ingenuity and care. You stand in a vaulted chamber where the air is cool and still. Dust motes drift in the shafts of light that pierce the narrow windows. Along the walls, shelves hold jars and amphorae labeled in fading ink. At the center lies a stone slab stained with time. On it rests fragments of wrapped linen and splintered wood. These are the remains of mummies brought from distant lands when tales of their healing powers reached eager ears. A healer approaches with chisels and mortar. He lifts a small fragment of bone and taps it against the slab. It cracks like pottery. He smiles and sets to work. You watch as he places the chip into a shallow mortar and begins to grind. His pestle spins circles, and the bone transforms into powder beneath his steady hand. He adds a shard of linen from the mummy's wrappings and grinds again. The mix becomes finer, almost silky. He taps the powder into a clay bowl and offers it to you. You lean forward and inhale. The scent is musty and ancient. You imagine the centuries trapped in each granule. He explains that this mummy powder holds virtues believed to draw out poison, ease headaches, and even knit broken bones together. Some scholars doubted logic, but when a drop of the powder touched the tongue it left, survivors convinced. You reach for a small leather pouch of the fresh mix. He measures a pinch and offers it to you. You place it on your tongue. It dissolves into gritty warmth. You feel a subtle tingle in your head as if tiny sparks were dancing along your temples. The effect is not immediate, but you trust that in time the remedy will stir your blood toward balance. Next, the healer moves to a shelf of clean honey and soft suet. He warms them together over a gentle flame and stirs until they blend into a smooth paste. You watch as he folds the bone dust into the sweet mixture. The transformation is uncanny. What began as skeletal remains becomes a salve that glows with golden promise. He cups your chin and spoons a dab onto the back of your hand. You feel the cool balm slide across your skin. He instructs you to spread it gently along sore muscles or broken skin. Your palm tingles as the salve warms. He explains that the heat coaxed from the bone and flesh of the mummy will transfer strength to your own limbs. You leave with the salve wrapped in cloth and the powder sealed in parchment. Outside the crypt, the afternoon sun warms your face. You feel lighter, not because the remedies have worked yet, but because you believe they will. In a world without modern diagnostics, the power of faith was as crucial as the power of a cure. That evening, a traveler arrives at the healer's door. He leans heavily on a crutch and carries a shield scarred by battle. His eyes widen at the sight of the mummy fragments. He asks how a dead body could help living flesh. The healer invites him to witness the grinding. The warrior nods and watches the mortar turn bone to dust. He accepts a salve and presses it to his broken wrist. Over the following days, you observe the traveler's healing. The swelling in his wrist subsides. He moves his fingers more easily. He tells tales of how the salve soothed his pain when nothing else could. He calls the remedy miraculous. You wonder if the marvel lies in the powder or in the courage it instills. In monasteries and courts throughout the land, similar scenes unfold. Mummy powder is mixed into pills wrapped in linen. Bone dust becomes an ingredient in healing cakes, pressed with herbs and wine. Apothecaries trade recipes in hushed tones. Researchers argue over who first discovered the secret powers of ancient remains. Despite the oddity of the method, its popularity grows. You learn that the supply of mummies is not endless. Some healers ship orders in secret to distant ports. Rumors tell of tomb robbers who sell fragments to the highest bidder. You see guards escort crates of linen and wood out of the crypt under cover of night. The cost of the powder climbs, and soon only the wealthy can afford to grind history into their pills. A local merchant commissions a batch of bone tablets for his ill wife. She suffers from a relentless fever. Night after night, she takes a dose with a cup of wine. By dawn, her cheeks shine with health, and her fever breaks. Word spreads that Egyptian pharaohs lend their power to the living. People whisper of kings and queens trapped in dust, waiting to heal the masses once more. You cannot ignore the irony. Bones, long buried beneath shifting sands, now hold sway over the living. You think of the dead kings who dreamed of eternity and never imagined their remains would one day ease a commoner's fever. You wonder what they would say if they could speak. Despite doubts and ethical questions, the practice endures. In distant villages, parents mix a spoonful of the powder into gruel for sick children. They watch their little ones sleep peacefully and wake with rosy cheeks. They thank the healer with gifts of bread and candles. For them, the line between life and death holds a promise of hope. As you travel on from that place, you carry a small sachet of mummy powder. You do not need it every day, but you keep it tucked close. It is a talisman of ancient strength and human ingenuity. You think of the hands that wrapped the linen so long ago. You think of the monks who tended the garden. You think of the healer who ground those bones with reverence. Night finds you on the road beneath the stars. You pause and sprinkle a pinch of powder into the air. It drifts away in the breeze. You imagine it touching the sky and bringing balance to the heavens. You feel a kinship with the countless souls who trusted this strange remedy. You realize that even in its oddity, it represents faith in life's persistence. You tuck the empty sachet into your cloak. The next day you will find new remedies, new cures, and new beliefs. But you will never forget how the dust of mummies and the grit of bone taught you that healing often combines the sacred and the strange. In that union lies a bridge between past and present, and a hope that even the most unexpected source can bring relief. You return to the healer's chamber in the early dawn mist. The stone floor is cool beneath your feet. Sunlight has not yet reached these walls, but candles flicker against the darkness. The healer greets you with a nod and gestures to a new patient. A young blacksmith cradles a forearm wrapped in bloodied cloth. He was struck during a furnace explosion. His bones are fractured and crushed. The healer lays the man gently on a low table. He unwraps the cloth to expose jagged skin and oozing tissue. You feel a shiver, but do not look away. The healer dips his fingers into a leather pouch of mummy powder and sprinkles it across the wound. You see the powder absorb the liquid, forming a dark paste that clings to raw flesh. The blacksmith's eyes widen at the cool touch. He breathes sharply as the healer covers the paste with warm suet and presses a clean strip of linen on top. The doctor explains that the salt and resin from ancient wrappings draw out infection and encourage the fractured bones to knit. You watch as he returns to his mortar and pestle. He grinds finely chipped bone from an ibis mummy. The bone dust is whiter than the linen on the table. He pours it into a glass of warm wine and stirs until smooth. You catch the scent of earth and something faintly sweet. The blacksmith raises the cup with a trembling hand and drinks. His face flushes with heat. He coughs, but swallows again. The healer tells him to rest and to return when the bandage grows damp. He smiles and says the wine will carry strength to his bones. You believe him, because the man's gaze holds gratitude more fierce than fear. Later in the morning, a group of pilgrims file into the chamber. They carry gifts of dried figs and salted fish. They kneel before the healer and whisper pleas for relief from a plague that ravaged their village. The healer washes his hands in a basin of rosewater, then dons clean linen gloves. He lines a tray with small clay tablets stamped with a cross. He presses each tablet into a mixture of crushed mummy bone and powdered linens. He sprinkles petals of calendula for their soothing scent and gently wraps each in fresh cloth. He passes the tablets among the pilgrims. They place them on their tongues and close their eyes. Some smile at the spice of the crushed petals. Others press a hand to their chest and breathe more easily. You sense relief in the air, as if the fear of sickness itself grows lighter. After the pilgrims depart, you follow the healer to a back room filled with jars of bone and linen fragments. He opens a wooden chest and draws out a long strip of embroidered cloth. It is stained dark but still strong. He tells you this is the binding cloth used to wrap royalty in death. You ask how he obtained it. He answers with a quiet smile that the cloth was rescued from a tomb before a desecration. He uses it sparingly for wounds so deep that ordinary linen fails. He measures a length and folds it into a shallow bowl. He sprinkles jade dust from a mummy mask and grinds it lightly into the cloth. The green powder mixes with the stained cloth like moss growing on ancient stone. He dips the cloth in honey and layers it onto a patient's severed hand. The honey soaks quickly, and the jade dust sinks into the tissue. He promises that this enchantment of bone and stone will soothe pain and form a rudimentary bandage until the flesh regrows. You help him tie the binding with soft twine. The patient opens his eyes and chuckles. He says he feels as though a king's hand protects him. You smile in relief. You feel that through odd alchemy of death and devotion, something lasting can be formed. In the quiet that follows, you gather the tools needed for tomorrow's cases. You wrap fresh cloth around a mortar to keep it clean. You refill jar after jar with new mummy chip and bone dust. You label each with the date and the source tomb. You record your work carefully in the ledger, knowing that future healers will rely on these notes. A messenger arrives with a letter sealed in wax. The healer breaks it open and reads in silence. You wait. The letter speaks of a nobleman with a broken leg not far away. He invitations the healer to treat the man at his manor and promises generous reward. The healer nods and tucks the letter into his robes. He tells you you will travel at dawn. The journey is long. You ride in a small carriage and carry a wooden box of powders and tablets beside you. The road winds through fields of green and trees just blooming. Birds call overhead. You marvel at the contrast between this gentle world and the grim work that awaits. At the manor, you are shown to a grand chamber. The nobleman lies on silken sheets with his leg propped on a velvet cushion. You approach with the healer and open the wooden box. You see bone dust still bright and linen powder set to greet the air. The healer selects a fine tablet and offers it to the nobleman. He swallows and smiles, as if tasting spice he has never known. You place strips of the ancient binding cloth around his leg, each layer rich with history. You apply the honey infused with jade powder and feel the patient's relief as warmth spreads through his flesh. The healer dims the candles and steps back. The nobleman thanks him with a bow and drops a purse of silver into your hands. You know that fortune follows faith and odd cures. You leave the manor richer, but more fulfilled by the knowledge that bones long buried can bring comfort to the living. As you ride home by starlight, you hold a small pouch of mummy linen in your hand. You think of how a fragment of ancient life can heal a broken limb or ease a fever. You realize that healing is an act that spans lifetimes. You marvel that even in death bones still serve the living. When you return to the healer's chamber, you kneel in thanks and help wash the day's tools. You feel the cool stone beneath your fingertips and the memory of grinding bone dust into paste. You understand that every crack of the blade and every pinch of powder carries hope and history and human compassion. That night you dream of wrappings drifting across dunes, of embalmed hands reaching toward you with secrets of life beyond death. You wake with a quiet trust that healing can be found in the most unexpected places. You feel honored to carry a piece of that ancient promise into a world still searching for cures. You step into a low stone hut at the edge of the village, where the air is thick with the sweet stench of drying herbs and something far fouler. A wooden trough sits at the center of the floor, its bottom layered with fresh straw. At one end, a burlap sack rests on a crate. Inside are small round pellets that look like dried seeds. The healer beckons you forward and holds up a handful. You see at once that these are not seeds, but donkey droppings carefully dried in the sun. You wrinkle your nose, but do not recoil. In this world, people believed that foul odors drew sickness out of the flesh. The stench of dung was thought to repel miasmas in the air and leach toxins from wounds as surely as a magnet draws iron. You watch as the healer crushes the pellets between two stones until they break apart into fibrous dust. He mixes the dust with water and a pitcher of fresh goat milk until a thick paste forms. He hands you a wooden spatula and invites you to spread the poultice on a tobacco leaf. You feel the paste cool and slick beneath your fingers. He gestures toward a patient who lies on a simple pallet nearby. A farmer with a festering ulcer on his calf lifts his gaze when he sees the healer approach. The man's face is drawn, his breathing shallow. He trusts this foul remedy more than any soothing balm. You step forward and lay the leaf against the wound. The paste oozes out from the leaf edges and clings to raw flesh. You smooth it gently, pressing the poultice into every crevice of the ulcer. The smell rises raw and potent, mingling with the goat milk sweetness and the sharp tang of chestnut bark. The farmer bites his lip and gulps. The healer covers the poultice with linen and ties it in place. He murmurs a chant and hands the farmer a cup of rosehip tea. The tea will draw fluids from his body and soothe pain while the dung poultice works its magic. You stand back and watch as the farmer nods and sips, eyes closed in relief from the chill of your touch. Outside, a group of women waits their turn. Each carries a scrap of cloth, soaked in sorrel juice and roots of comfrey. They have come for burns and rashes and stubborn swellings. The healer greets them with gentle words and takes the next portion of dung dust from the sack. He explains that donkey dung has properties that counteract foul humors in the body. In its foulness lies its power to draw out rot and cleanse flesh. You walk with the healer to a raised herb bed near the door. He plucks sprigs of rosemary and thyme. He crushes the leaves into oil and adds a few drops to the remaining paste. The scent of herbs tames the stench just enough to ease your nose. You realize that this is a careful balance between revulsion and relief. The remedy must smell foul enough to work, but not so vile as to send the patient fleeing. A soldier arrives with a bruised shoulder swollen from a blow. He sits on a stool and bares his arm. You hold the bowl of paste while the healer applies it to the purple flesh. You feel the paste press warm against your palm. The herbs and the dung dust form a mask that pulls moisture and pain from the tissue. The soldier groans but nods approval when the bandage is in place. After sundown, the healer re-enters the hut carrying a lantern and a new supply of dung dust. He asks you to gather water from the well. You fetch the bucket and return to find the patients asleep or dozing. The poultice has sealed their wounds against the night chill. You carry fresh linens to replace the old bandages soaked with ointment and herbal decoction. You help the healer wrap the wounds again. telling the farmer that his leg will mend faster with each change. As you leave the hut, you pause on the threshold. The smell of donkey dung still hangs in the air, but it is laced with rosemary and the quiet gratitude of those healed here. You realize that in a world without clean hospitals or potent medicines, people relied on what they had. They turned filth into medicine and pain into promise. You walk home under a sky spattered with stars. You feel the night air cool your skin and the memory of dung scent faded by distant wind. You understand that healing often comes from unexpected sources, and that true remedy demands courage as well as faith. You carry the lesson close. Sometimes the foulest cures bring the greatest comfort. You step into the healer's dimly lit chamber and freeze at the sight of the wooden cages lining one side of the room. Within their bars wriggle centipedes as thick as your finger and glinting with iridescent shells. In a glass bowl on the table, live spiders whose legs thread the air. A larger wooden tub holds water and writhing eels sliding over one another like living ribbons. Your skin prickles with equal parts curiosity and dread. The healer greets you with gentle authority. He explains that all creatures carry a spark of life that may cure specific ailments. Spiders for wounds that refuse to close, centipedes for joint swelling, and eels for internal imbalances that cause stomach pains. You nod, heart pounding, and understand that here in a world without sterile scalpels or soothing drafts, people reached for the strange and the living to restore their fragile balance. A farmer enters clutching his battered arm. A thorn in his garden has turned into a festering sore that nothing will heal. The healer steps forward and selects a large spider. He picks it from the cage by the tip of its legs, careful not to harm it. You watch the hairs on its body tremble as he carries it to the wound. The farmer winces and grips the edge of the table as the healer presses the spider gently onto his flesh. The creature clings, weaving a thin web across the cut. Its movements are slow as it explores the edges of the sore. You feel a pull in your chest, a strange compassion for the spider as it clings for life. The healer covers the spider with a damp cloth. You help tie the cloth in place to keep the creature anchored. He whispers a blessing and hands the farmer a cup of rosehip broth. The spider remains for an entire night, weaving its web as a salve that holds infection at bay. By morning, the wound shows signs of knitting, the edges drawing together beneath the silky mesh. Next, you witness centipede therapy for a merchant's rheumatic knee. The centipedes are coaxed from their cage into a shallow bowl. Their many legs brush the rim as the healer lifts one by the tail. He applies it to the swollen joint, letting its tiny feet trace lines along taut skin. A faint tingling spreads through the merchant's flesh. The healer instructs him to keep the creature in place until it finishes exploring. He then moves it gently to another spot, guiding it across each ache and pinch until the centipede's body grows heavy and still. He returns it to its container and dismisses the merchant, whose gait is already lighter. You approach the eel tub with trepidation. The healer explains that eels were prized for digestive troubles. Their slimy skin and muscular writhing were believed to draw poisons from the stomach. A woman with a bloated belly and endless cramps reclines on a couch. The healer lifts an eel in his arms and places it against her abdomen. The eel coils and uncoils in search of warmth. It slithers across her skin, inching toward her navel. She sighs as the cool, slick body glides over her suffering. You step forward with a warm towel to catch the small stream of water the eel sheds. When the creature has traced the contours of her pain, the healer removes it and uses moss and honey to dry the skin. Behind you, another patient whispers that he once saw a frog cure his apprentice's toothache. You turn and watch the healer draw a small toad from another wooden box. He sets it beside a man whose jaw throbbed from a rotten tooth. The toad's bumpy skin gleams as the healer presses it against the man's cheek. He instructs him to hold the frog in place for the morning. You wonder if the toad feels honored or imprisoned. The man swears the pain eased by dawn, though his courage may have mattered as much as the creature's magic. You spend the afternoon cleaning cages and preparing new treatments. You refill bowls with fresh spring water for the eels and mist the spider jars with dew. You sort centipedes by size, noting which ones have grown too old or slow for use. The healer praises your care. He says the difference between a cure and a curse lies in respect for the animals. You realize that each creature is a partner in the rite of healing, not an ingredient to be burned or buried. Later, a traveler arrives with a scar across his face. He says he was kicked by a mule and the wound refused to close. The healer prepares a spider cocoon. He threads several silky webs between two sticks and uses the weave to bind the scar. He explains that spider silk has antiseptic properties and provides gentle support as skin knits. You hold the sticks while he tightens the silk and secures it with beeswax. The traveler gazes at his reflection in a polished bowl. He thanks you with tears and promises to spread word of these strange cures across the land. As twilight deepens, you carry the last eel back to its tub. You pause at the door and take in the hush of the chamber. The candlelight flickers across the jars and cages, each creature resting in its little world. You feel a kinship with these odd healers of the medieval mind. They saw life in every living being and believed that nature's smallest forms could restore the largest pains. Back in your own quarters, you scrub your hands of slime and dust. You catch your reflection in a small mirror. Your eyes are bright and curious. You realize that in a world where illness could kill swiftly, people turned to every remedy, however unnatural it seemed, for hope. You drift to sleep with visions of spiders spinning threads of healing, centipedes mapping lines of pain, and eels washing away suffering. You understand that medicine is as much about belief and wonder as it is about the body. And sometimes the boldest cures come wrapped in the smallest, most unexpected packages. You wake before dawn to the slick clatter of scales on stone. The healer's chamber is already lit by lanterns and candles, their soft glow reflecting off small pools of water. Along one wall, a narrow trough holds silver eels, their bodies coiling like living ribbons. On a table beside it, a large wooden box contains spiders the size of your palm, their legs folded in gentle repose. In a corner, a shallow bowl houses centipedes, whose many feet rustle like wind in dry leaves. You draw a steady breath, steady despite the mixture of dread and wonder that stirs in your chest. The healer greets you without surprise. He dips a ladle into the eel trough and lifts a single creature into his cupped hands. Its body writhes softly, slick and cool. You watch as he speaks softly, murmuring words you cannot quite hear. Then he places the eel against a man's belly, the creature's head pressing into the navel. The man winces as the eel slides upward. Its muscular body winds across his ribs, exploring crevices of pain and spasm. You stand beside the man's shoulder and feel the tension drain from his muscles. The healer's gentle coaxing of the eel across the farmer's belly seems to draw out the ache as the creature feeds on the stale humours that have lodged there. After 20 minutes, the eel has finished its search. The healer returns it to the trough with a soft splash. He instructs the farmer to rest and to drink a decoction of mint and honey to soothe the stirred belly. You help the man from the table and guide him to a straw mattress by the window where the morning light will comfort his body as the eel's work continues beneath his skin. Next, a child with a deep cut on her forearm arrives in her mother's arms. The healer unwraps the wound and sets the spiders free. You watch with fascination as the spiders, black and fragile, clamber across the girl's skin. One ventures into the cut and weaves a thin web along its edges. The girl's breath catches, but the healer croons encouragement. The spider's silk draws the wound edges gently together, sealing the flesh as it spins. You place a cup of chamomile tea in the girl's hand. She sips slowly, entranced by the spider's delicate weaving. When the web covers the entire cut, the healer brushes it with sweet oil and rings it with powdered plantain. The final webbed bandage looks almost like lace. The mother sighs with relief, offering coins that the healer refuses with a gentle shake of his head. A soldier enters with a stiff knee swollen from a fall during training. The healer examines him and decides on centipede therapy. You carry a small wooden box of centipedes to the table. Each one shimmers with segmented armor and moves with endless legs. The soldier sits and bares his kneecap. The healer places a centipede at the center of the swelling and presses it gently downward. It grips the skin and begins to explore. The soldier bears the tickle of its legs with a grimace. The healer lifts the centipede aside and guides it to another spot. You watch the fluid in the knee drain slowly into a waiting bowl as the centipedes wander in circles. When the swelling subsides, the healer collects the creatures in a fresh bowl of water. The soldier flexes his knee and breathes easier. You spend the afternoon cleaning the eels, spider cages, and centipede bowls. You rinse each one in clean spring water and replace moss bedding. You sort the centipedes by size and note any that appear sluggish. The healer observes your work and praises your care, reminding you that the creatures themselves must be healthy to heal others. You sweep paths and gather fresh herbs for tomorrow's salves. Lavender roses and chamomile flowers fill wicker baskets. The air smells of medicine and earth and strange promise. Late in the day, a noblewoman arrives in a carriage. She carries a shawl pressed to her temple. Her eyes are red and feverish. The healer greets her and administers a trio of leeches along her hairline. You see the tiny sorcerers latch on and begin to drink. The noblewoman sips barley water and whispers thanks. You catch her name, Lady Isolde. The healer explains that after the leeches finish, she will lie in bed for the night, and the removed blood will carry away the fever that torments her. As evening falls, you join the healer in the courtyard garden. Under the glow of lanterns, you prepare fresh bowls of eels and spiders for tomorrow's patients. The healer hums a soft chant as he dips each creature into a tonic of rosemary and salt. You learn that this calms them before use and reduces risk of infection. You marvel at the calm with which the spiders circle his finger and the way the eels slip between his hands without panic. You leave the hut at nightfall, feeling a curious kinship with these strange healers and their living remedies. You walk home under the stars, the scent of damp earth and drying herbs on your clothes. You reflect on how life can come from life in the most unexpected forms, and how faith in nature's smallest creatures brought real healing to bodies wounded and sick. As you drift to sleep, you see images of spiders dragging sickness into their silken web, centipedes pumping fluid from swelling joints, and eels washing away fever with their cold touch. You understand that healing is not always gentle, but in these living cures you witnessed hope in motion, a promise that even the oddest ally can restore balance to a broken body. You return at dawn to the eel trough and spider cage, lantern in hand. Mist curls around your feet as you step into the courtyard. The healer stands by the trough, waiting. He nods and begins at once. A messenger from the far monastery arrives bearing news of a wounded monk. His arm bears burn wounds from a forge accident. The healer motions you forward. You carry a wooden bowl of spiders and a basin of warm water. He selects a spider nearly translucent with age. He places it against the monk's charred skin. It crawls gently, its legs seeking out the edges of each blister. You hold the basin to catch drips of sanitizer he's applied first. The spider's silk binds the burned flesh in tight lace, sealing it from air and insects. The monk closes his eyes and breathes deeply, relief washing over his face as the creature weaves life into death-marked skin. Next, the healer calls for eels. You fetch 2 from the trough and present them on a broad leaf. Their bodies glisten wet and pliant. The healer rolls one toward a fisherwoman whose wrist throbs with arthritis. The creature winds round her joint with a faint sucking noise. The woman grips the table but does not cry out. The healer whispers encouragement. The eel's pressure coaxes stiff tendons into movement. You see her smile as she flexes her wrist freely for the first time in months. A child with a high fever stumbles in, supported by her mother. The healer kneels and applies a spider to each temple. You steady the girl's head as the spiders crawl across her brow. The chill of their bodies sends shivers through the child. You pass her a cup of lemon balm tea to sip while the spiders spin. When the insects peel away, you notice that her flush has lightened. Her breathing slows. The mother bows gratefully. Back in the garden, you tend centipedes for the next treatment. The healer shows you how to pinch the creatures gently to test their vigor. You sort them into bowls beneath heating stones that keep the water at a steady warmth. He explains that centipedes weaken in cold and healers must guard their strength. You wipe your hands on a cloth and breathe in the herb-scented air. An elder arrives with a limp. Years of walking the hills left her knees bent and swollen. The healer applies centipedes one by one along the tendon. Each scuttles across her skin, drawing out pain and congestion. You hold her hand until she breathes steady, and then set down the creature. She stands carefully, her knees softening. She nods in wonder and thanks. In the afternoon, you help prepare eels for a stomach ailment. The healer slices a linen cloth into strips. He wraps 2 eels in separate bandages and ties each above and below a patient's navel. You hold him steady as he positions the wriggling creatures. They press into his sides with warm strength. The patient lies still, listening to the eel's gentle movements. By evening, the healer returns, removes them, and rubs a soothing balm into the skin. The man sits and thanks you both as he rises without clutching his belly. As twilight falls, the healer gathers every used creature. Spiders, centipedes, and eels are cleaned and returned to holding jars or troughs. You help rinse the cages and change the water, adding fresh spring flow. You prop open windows and hang herbs to dry. The scent of lavender and mint drifts through the chamber, masking any lingering odors. He leads you to the herb beds and points out a patch of rue. He plucks a leaf and hands it to you. He says that rue oil rubbed into sore muscles after an animal treatment prevents infection and calms bruises. You inhale its bitter aroma and nod. You press a drop into your palm and rub it across your sore knuckles. Later, he offers you a bowl of warm sheep's broth thickened with chopped onion and garlic. You sip it gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through your core. He reminds you that living cures work best, combined with nourishing food and rest. You look around the quiet chamber and realize this odd little world of creatures and plants is built on care, respect, and hope. That night, you dream of webs of silk drawing away sorrow, legs of centipedes dancing through pain, and slithering eels washing away weakness. You drift to sleep, grateful for the wild alliance between humankind and the small living things that carried healing in their tiny bodies. You wake before sunrise and follow the healer down a narrow stair into a stone chamber beneath. The apothecary. The air is cool and echoing. Torches flicker against rough walls scarred by centuries of soot. A thick wooden table stands at the center, its surface lined with linen and straw. On it lies a stout man's skull, his eyes closed as if in deep sleep. This is the patient. He suffers from relentless headaches and visions he cannot explain. The people believe evil spirits have taken root in his mind. You swallow as the healer lays out his instruments. A wooden mallet, a sharp metal awl, and a set of bronze trepanation rings rest on a cloth. You feel a faint thrill of fear. The healer meets your gaze and smiles gently. He explains that trepanning is the art of making a small hole in the skull to let out pressure, pain, and whatever spirits plague the mind. He says that despite its reputation, many who endured this surgery recovered with clearer thought and eased suffering. You wake before sunrise and follow the healer down a narrow stair into a stone chamber beneath the apothecary. The air is cool and echoing. Torches flicker against rough walls scarred by centuries of soot. A thick wooden table stands at the center, its surface lined with linen and straw. On it lies a stout man's skull, his eyes closed as if in deep sleep. This is the patient. He suffers from relentless headaches and visions he cannot explain. The people believe evil spirits have taken root in his mind. You swallow as the healer lays out his instruments. A wooden mallet, a sharp metal awl, and a set of bronze trepanation rings rest on a cloth. You feel a faint thrill of fear. The healer meets your gaze and smiles gently. He explains that trepanning is the art of making a small hole in the skull to let out pressure, pain, and whatever spirits plague the mind. He says that despite its reputation, many who endured this surgery recovered with clearer thought and eased suffering. The patient moans low as the healer places his hand on the man's forehead. He cleans the skin with vinegar and crushed mint. He dips the awl in hot oil, purifying the metal until it glows. You step closer, heart pounding. The awl's tip catches flickers of torchlight. Then the healer strikes the skull with a firm tap of the mallet. You flinch as the awl cuts through skin and bone, sinking deeper with each careful blow. He rotates the awl to widen the hole. A fine dust of bone falls onto the linen. The patient grits his teeth and grips the table's edge, but he does not cry out. His face twists with pain and determination. When the ring fits snugly in the cut, the healer scratches a few more circles to peel away a disc of bone. You watch the ring remove the plug like a cork from a bottle. The inside of the skull is damp with brain fluid, but the healer presses a clean cloth and the flow slows. He holds the ring aloft and shows it to you, streaked with blood and bone powder. Then he washes the wound with rosewater and seals it with a paste of honey and shredded nettle leaves. The patient drifts in and out of consciousness as the healer binds the scalp. You help wrap the bandages and guide him to a straw bed. His breathing calms. His head no longer pounds. The healer sits beside him and murmurs healing prayers. You feel relief and wonder that someone survived such an ordeal. Over the next days, you care for the patient. You change his bandages and prepare broth scented with sage. You speak softly to him as he sleeps, praising his bravery. Each dawn you check the trepanned hole. The edges knit together. No fever rises. The healer tells you that about half patients recover fully, and many more find lasting relief. The risks are great, but so are the rewards. In a time with few options for head injuries and chronic pain, word of this success travels quickly. A noble woman arrives, seeking help for her daughter's bizarre fits. The healer agrees. You assist as he marks a spot behind the girl's ear. He drills a small hole to ease the pressure in her temples. The girl cries but holds still. Afterwards, she rests quietly, and when she awakens, her eyes are clear of fear. You watch her smile, and know this strange surgery has brought light back into her life. Across the region, other practitioners learn these techniques. Scholars debate the best instruments and methods. Some use flint tools carved to a sharp point. Others favor bronze for its strength. You gather dust from broken flints and grind it to a fine powder for cleaning wounds. You prepare linseed oil and willow bark poultice for antiseptic protection. Each step you master makes you part of this surprising tradition that risked life for the promise of relief. One afternoon, a wounded soldier arrives with a fractured skull from a battle axe. His helmet was split in two. He could not speak without pain. The healer examines the jagged cracks and decides to trepan a piece away to relieve trapped blood clots. You assist as he drills above the soldier's temple. Bone fragments fall outward in dusty rain. When the ring comes free, the healer presses the wound gently. The soldier's eyes roll back in his head, but he lives. In time, the bruising recedes, and he regains his speech. He kneels before the healer, and you, gratitude shining in his gaze. As you walk home by starlight, you reflect on the courage of those medieval surgeons. Without sterile rooms or pain control, they performed skull surgery with faith in their skill. They trusted that relieving the unseen forces behind the eyes would restore balance. You understand that bravery and care carried as much weight as expertise. That night, you dream of bone rings spinning in torch glow, of gentle hands guiding a blade through flesh, and of bright minds freed from torment. You wake with a steady pulse, and the knowledge that even the most radical treatments in history were born of compassion and hope. Trepanning may seem barbaric now, but in its time, it was a gift, a way to let light into shadowed minds and healing into wounded souls. You return to the healer's underground chamber the next morning while dawn light seeps through a narrow slit high in the wall. The air is cooler now, and you can smell damp stone mixed with faint spices from last night's incense. The healer stands beside the trepanned monk you helped yesterday. He smiles and motions you forward to begin care. First, you gently unwrap the bandages around the hole in the man's skull. The edges of the wound have formed a pale ridge of new skin, and the bone beneath shows no dark stains of infection. You clean the area with a cloth dipped in rose water, and then mix a fresh paste of crushed comfrey leaves and rendered beeswax. Comfrey is prized for its ability to draw tissues together, encouraging scalp and bone to heal in harmony. The wax seals the wound and protects it from dust and miasmas. While you work, the healer tells you about survival stories. He speaks of a humble peasant who endured skull surgery after a falling beam struck his head. He walked away with no memory of the pain, claiming he felt lighter and more alive. You marvel that someone could survive such an operation without the comforts of an apothecary or a tender ward. The healer shakes his head in wonder too, grateful for the courage of his predecessors. Next, a merchant arrives carrying a silver box. He opens it to reveal a ring of bronze studded with small spikes. This is a trepanning crown. Instead of chiseling a disc out of the skull, some surgeons use this crown to cut through bone more precisely. The healer places it on the merchant's forehead, aligns the spikes on either side of the painful spot, and begins turning it. Each rotation scores the bone until a shallow groove forms. Then he pries the crown free and lifts the ring of skull with clean bone forceps. Blood trickles into a silver bowl. You steady the bowl and murmur a prayer, grateful for the skill that lets surgeons remove just enough bone to relieve headaches without weakening the entire skull. The merchant swears he felt a surge of relief as soon as the ring came away. He bows deeply and places a pouch of coins at the healer's feet. That silver will buy more supplies and feed more patients. You watch as the healer graciously accepts a portion, then scolds the merchant for risking life in his travels. The merchant laughs and says that life without relief is no life at all. You clean the trepanning crown and set it aside as two villagers enter carrying children plagued by strange fits. The healer examines their crowns and chooses small awls to make barely perceptible holes just above each ear. The goal is to free trapped spirits believed to cause madness. The children cling to their mothers and cry at the sharp tool, but the healer's steady words calm them. You help press linen over the tiny wounds afterward. The mothers thank you with tears, hopeful that the children's nightmares will fade. In the afternoon, you witness a demonstration for village elders. The healer trepans a sheep's skull to show the method's safety on living bone. The crowd watches as skull fragments lift easily, and the sheep bleats but stands still. A carved wooden stake holds its brain gently within sight. The healer cleans and reassembles the bone, then lets the sheep wander off. The demonstration convinces many doubters that trepanning can aid humans as it did beasts for thousands of years. Back in the patient ward, you care for the man with the burn wounds. Yesterday, you bandaged his face. Today, the skin shows pink patches of recovery. You soften old bandages in warm water and remove them slowly. Beneath, you find no sign of infection. You mix fresh mummy powder with honey to seal the wounds. The man smiles when you apply it, grateful that his ugly scars will fade sooner than expected. A local apothecary visits to observe and learn. He takes notes and asks questions about healing rates. The healer explains that as long as the practitioner keeps wounds clean and supports the patients with nourishing broths and rest, about 2 out of 3 survive trepanning. The apothecary nods and promises to share these teachings with his own community. You realize that knowledge spreads not only through manuscripts but through hands-on healing and shared success. As dusk approaches, the healer asks you to prepare poultices of willow bark and grated cheese for tomorrow's cases. He wraps up the trepanning instruments and thanks you for your careful work. You help sweep the chamber and light a final lantern before stepping into the cool evening. Outside, the courtyard is quiet. The torches have died down and only a sliver of moon lights the path. You pause by a small gravestone marking the healer's first patient from 50 years ago. The inscription is nearly worn away, but you trace the letters with your finger. You think of every life changed by these daring surgeries. You breathe deeply and feel both humbled and inspired. That night you dream of rings cutting through bone like petals in a flower. You dream of hands steady in the torchlight, and of ordinary people transformed by courage and skill. You wake with newfound respect for those who dared drill into the vaults of the mind to free bodies from torment. Tomorrow you know the healer will perform more surgeries. You will stand ready with linen and honey and watch as lives are balanced by holes in the skull. And you will remember that healing often requires bravery beyond measure. In those small openings, you glimpse the medieval surgeon's promise that suffering can be released and minds set free, one tiny hole at a time. You step through the heavy oak doors of the monastery's cloister garden just as dawn light spills over neatly trimmed hedges and gravel paths. The air is cool and saturated with dew. A gentle breeze carries the scent of lavender and sage from rows of wooden planters. You follow a narrow path between tall rose bushes heavy with blooms. Petals, the color of sunrise, glow in the new light. Monks in simple robes move silently among the beds, their hands brushing leaves with attentive care. A healer monk greets you by name and leads you deeper into the garden. He explains that these walls enclose a living pharmacy where every plant has purpose. Fevers, and madness alike yield to carefully prepared elixirs. You first visit the rose arbors. The healer plucks petals into a copper bowl, their fragrance rising like memory. He then crushes a handful of petals between smooth stones and mixes them with clear spring water. The result is a pale rosewater tincture believed to calm agitation and bring restful sleep. You lift the bowl to your lips and inhale. The scent is sweet and soothing, like a memory of childhood afternoons in a warm courtyard. The healer offers you a small cup. You sip slowly. The cool liquid flutters along your tongue and cools the heat behind your eyes. He tells you that rose petals contain natural astringents that reduce inflammation and ease nervous tension. Monks use it to treat those struggling with fever dreams or churning thoughts. Next, the healer guides you to a raised bed of feverfew. The plant's lacy white flowers sway in the breeze. He picks a few blooms and wraps them in linen sachets. You hold one to your nose and taste the bitter tang. He explains that feverfew has been used for centuries to reduce fevers and soothe headaches. Monks steep the blossoms in warm wine and administer small doses to those whose blood runs too hot. You watch as he measures out a dose and places it on a spoon. He offers it to a stable hand who nods and swallows. In time, the aching in the man's temples will ease and his skin will cool. You follow the healer to a circular herb plot divided into sections for sage, thyme, and valerian. Each section is marked by a carved stone bearing the plant's name. The healer harvests sprigs of sage and crushes them in a mortar. You crush licorice root alongside it until the mixture forms a sweet, earthy paste. He adds warmed goat's milk and stirs gently. The result is a thick tonic that monks believe restores mental clarity and cures melancholy. You taste a small dollop. The flavor is rich and slightly spicy. You feel warmth spread from your chest to your head. The healer smiles and says that sorrow sometimes comes from a mind out of balance. This tonic brings equilibrium. As you move on, you pass a small glass greenhouse at the garden's edge. Inside, delicate plants like lavender and rosemary thrive in pots beneath glazed panels. You step inside to inspect a stand of rosemary. Its needle-like leaves shimmer. The healer plucks a sprig and crushes its needles in his hands. The oil that emerges is pungent and clean. He mixes it with olive oil and rubs it into a patient's temples and forehead. The patient closes her eyes and breathes deeply. Inhaling the rosemary oil eases fatigue and restores focus. The healer says that rosemary was once called memory plant and thought to ward off madness. Outside the greenhouse, he shows you valerian root buried under low green mounds. He digs gently and lifts a knobby brown root. He washes it, slices it thin, and brews it into a strong tea. You sip the dark infusion. The bitterness leaves a calm ache in your limbs. The healer explains that valerian root pacifies anxiety and helps troubled sleepers rest without nightmares. Monks rely on it for those whose minds wander to dark corners in the still of night. You accompany the healer to a stone bench beneath an ancient oak. He pours a blend of chamomile and hyssop into a wooden bowl. He invites you to crush the flowers and inhale their scent. You press petals between your fingers and let the aroma rise. It is light and honeyed. He mixes the crushed herbs into a syrup of boiled wildflower honey. He offers it to travelers and foundlings brought to the monastery gates. A single spoonful eases stomach turmoil and quiets panic in children's hearts. You taste it yourself. The sweetness smooths rough places in your chest. As midday approaches, you help gather fresh basil and mint from raised troughs. You and the healer bundle the leaves and carry them to a nearby mill. With steady hands, you grind them into a paste, then pour warm vinegar over the crushed herb mass. The mixture ferments briefly, then you strain it into a dark glass vial. The potent vinegar infusion is used to clean wounds and lightly massage sore muscles. Its sharp sting drives away lingering stench and draws out infection. The healer tells you that monks often carried these vials on long journeys, treating injuries on the road and preserving health far from the garden walls. In the afternoon, a noblewoman arrives carrying a carved wooden box. She opens it to reveal silver goblets. She requests a tincture to ease her husband's coughing fits. The healer selects a blend of thyme and horehound. He places dried leaves into a glass jug and pours brandy over them. The mixture steeps until the alcohol takes on the herb's essence. He pours a measure into a goblet and offers it to the nobleman. He drinks and coughs once, then settles into a bench. The noblewoman watches anxiously. You stand by with a pot of chamomile tea for her. Within an hour, the nobleman breathes more freely. The healer explains that thyme's antiseptic oils calm spasms in the throat and reduce phlegm. The nobleman nods in gratitude. You spend the last hour of daylight drying fresh bundles of herbs near the hearth inside the monastery. Lavender, mint, and sage hang in bunches that sway gently in the breeze from open windows. The healer instructs you to check them over the week to ensure they dry evenly. You feel the weight of responsibility. These herbs will furnish cures to many who cannot travel here. As dusk falls, the healer joins monks in vespers within the abbey church. You stand quietly among them, lantern in hand. The scent of burning incense and heated herbs mingle in the vaulted space. You reflect on everything you learned, that healing is a blend of faith and science, of bitter and sweet, of scent and taste. Each herb carried memory and promise, each tincture a bridge between body and spirit. That night you drift to sleep wrapped in linen, scented with lavender. The garden's quiet hum follows you into dreaming. You imagine rows of rose petals unfurling in moonlight, of chamomile blossoms nodding in gentle breeze, of eels and spiders only feet away tending wounds. You wake with gratitude for medieval gardeners and healers who coaxed miracles from soil and scent. You understand that sometimes the kindest cure grows quietly in a sunlit courtyard. You arrive at the edge of the city, where the road ends in a heavy wooden gate, guarded by two men in grimy tunics. A faded sign reads Isolation House in chipped paint. Beyond the gate, you glimpse rows of small stone huts, each with a single shuttered window. The air is thick with smoke from burning juniper boughs. The guards eye you warily. You state your business and show a small sealed parchment from the city council. They nod without ceremony and swing the gate open with a groan. Inside the courtyard, you see plague doctors moving among the huts. Their wide-brimmed hats cast dark shadows over leather beaks stuffed with aromatic herbs. They carry long wooden staffs to examine patients without touching them. The plague doctor's mask looks strange to you, but you know people believe the foul odors of disease hide in the air. The herbs inside the beak, lavender, mint, and rosemary, are meant to purify each breath and protect the wearer from miasmas. You follow a narrow path to a round stone house where a woman with a red mark on her cheek sits on a stool. 2 men stand watch at the door. The plague doctor greets you with a curt bow. He takes out a small brass instrument to test the woman's wrist for a fever. He whispers to her in a gentle voice. She nods, and the doctor steps aside. You watch as another driver drips sweetened vinegar drops into her mouth. They believe that infected air must be balanced by strong tastes. The woman is moved to a separate quarter near the chapel. There she will stay until she recovers, or her courage fades. You see other beds in the room. Men lie wrapped in rough blankets. Their faces are drawn and pale. They breathe slowly. You hear coughing and low moans. You realize this house holds the sickest of the sick. You walk past a small open window where herbs leaf through breeze. A line of lavender, sage, and mugwort sways. The monastic gardeners planted them here to protect inhabitants. You breathe deep, letting the flavors settle in your chest. You imagine that with every breath disease pulls away like shadows before dawn. Beyond the roundhouse, you find a larger building marked Lazaretto. This was once a warehouse for grain. Now it holds hundreds marked for quarantine. The doors are locked and guarded. You step closer and see white crosses painted on the walls. They designate spaces for plague patients. The sound of distant prayers drifts through the cracks. A young boy offers to show you inside. He was ordered to help carry water and wood. You follow him through a low arch. Inside, the scent of decay mixes with burning juniper. The sound of rags dragging across stone fills the air. You feel the weight of so many lives confined to this one space. You see families huddled together. Some tend to children. Some rock in silence. No one laughs here. You pass a dog curled in a corner. It is calm despite the chaos. You wonder if animals know more than people about disease. You move on. At the far end of the hall, you find a scribe, recording names on a wooden tablet. He writes quickly, marking those who arrive and those who are carried out. You see tears fall onto the wood. He does not look up. You realize that this ledger is the last record of many lives. You step back into the courtyard. A doctor raises his staff and shouts for fresh linen. You hurry with cloth to replace the sheets on a cot. The patient there coughs and reaches for you. You press a cool cloth to his forehead and offer a sip of water. His eyes close in relief. You realize that even in the darkest times, small kindnesses matter more than grand cures. Next, you visit the pest house at the city wall. This is a remote building where the most desperate are sent. Relief workers bring food through a small hatch in the door. You speak to one of them and learn that no one stays here willingly. They wear rags soaked in vinegar and carry bells to warn others when they pass by. You find a quiet corner and pour out the last of your water ration. A woman angles her crutch so you can refill it. She thanks you in a whisper. As the sun sets, you join the monks in the chapel built beside the quarantine yard. Their chants echo off stone. You kneel and pray for those you met today. You pray for mercy for the infected and for strength for those who care for them. Walking home, you pass another isolation gate. The scent of juniper lingers on the breeze. The street beyond feels alive with laughter and song. You pause, thinking of the men and women left behind. You realize that quarantine, though cruel, saved countless lives. It kept fear at bay, and allowed disease to run its course without overwhelming entire cities. You draw a deep breath and notice the air tastes different. You think of how in a plague year even a moment of fresh wind feels like grace. You swallow and feel a quiet gratitude for every safe step you take away from those walls. That night in your own bed you place a sprig of lavender under your pillow. You sleep easily, knowing you have played a small part in the practice of quarantine. You understand that isolation was not only about keeping the sick away, but about giving them a place to fight for life. In your dreams you see gates locking behind you, bells ringing, and plague doctors moving silently through corridors of suffering. You see the gardeners planting herbs and the record keepers writing names. You see hope, flickering like a candle, burning in the darkest of places. You wake with a sense of purpose. You know that quarantine and pest houses are a testament to humanity's will to survive. In separation we find healing. In isolation we discover mercy. And in caring for the afflicted we remember the fragile gift of life. You rise before dawn and set out along a dusty road that winds through green fields. In the distance you see the spire of a great cathedral. Pilgrims walk beside you in silence or hushed conversation. Each carries a token for the journey: a scallop shell, a length of cloth, or a simple wooden cross. You carry a small flask of water from the holy spring you visited yesterday. The path is rough, but you feel a lightness in your step born of hope and shared purpose. Pilgrimage was once the only remedy when apothecaries and leech gardens offered no cure. A journey to a shrine, or a holy well promised healing through faith. You first learned of it when your mother fell ill with a persistent fever. The physician could do no more, and the barber could only bleed her so many times. In desperation, you carried her to the nearest healing spring. There she drank deeply and bathed her swollen limbs in the cold water. By sunrise, the fever had broken. You remember the wonder in her eyes as she kissed the stone trough and traced the carved symbols of Christ and the saints. You arrive at the well just as the sun touches the carved arch above its stone basin. A monk lifts the iron grate and lets you see the water glimmering in the darkness below. Ever since the well was discovered, miracles have been told. Lame men walked again, maidens with heartache felt new joy, and the blind claimed to glimpse shadows of light. You fill your flask and pause. The water tastes sweet and pure. You let it swirl against your tongue as if tasting faith itself. Around the well, pilgrims kneel in cycles of prayer. They tie ribbons to the branches overhead or press coins into cracks in the stone. You press your hands to the cool water and whisper your burden. You return home with the flask, believing that water carries something of the well's grace. Your pilgrimage continues to the relic chapel at the cathedral. Inside the vaulted nave, you see golden shrines and silver reliquaries. Each holds a fragment of a saint's bone or a piece of the true cross. A priest beckons you forward. He lifts a small bone shard and places it against your brow. You feel a warmth travel through your temples. The priest chants a blessing. A hush falls over the crowd. You close your eyes and feel a sense of peace wash through you. Next, you venerate a cloth stained with the blood of a martyr. The deacon dips a finger in holy oil and marks your forehead with a cross. You feel strength in that simple sign. For centuries, the faithful have touched these cloths, hoping to share in the martyr's steadfast courage. Word has spread of a miraculous statue in a small chapel at the edge of town. You join a procession of pilgrims carrying candles and hymn books. You walk under banners painted with scenes of healing and hope. When you arrive, you see the statue of a robed figure with outstretched hands. The statue's eyes seem to follow you. A priest leads you in prayer, and you place your own hands upon the statue's feet. You feel a gentle hum beneath your palms. Some say the statue weeps tears of oil. You watch several pilgrims press cloth to its shoes and carry away small drops of the flow. Night deepens and the chapel is lit only by beeswax candles. You join the pilgrims in a candlelight vigil, and listen to their stories. A widower claims his wife's asthma disappeared after she touched a fragment of a saint's rib. A child who had never walked took his first steps here. Each tale blends history and faith with the unspoken courage of those who traveled far and risked much for a chance at healing. You step outside into the cool evening air. The stars shine above like scattered embers. You know your journey may not cure every ache, but your spirit feels renewed. You carry with you a vial of holy oil, a fragment of cloth, and the memory of water that once healed your mother. As you walk home, you pass along the road once more. You see pilgrims still moving toward other shrines. You meet their eyes and nod in understanding. You carry the knowledge that sometimes faith and pilgrimage can work wonders where medicine falters. Back in your own home, you anoint your forehead with the oil and whisper thanks. You place your relics on a shelf by your bedside. You feel a calm resolve that whatever illness comes, you will face it with courage, faith, and the memory of miracles granted to those who believed. That night you sleep more deeply than you have in weeks. Your dreams are gentle streams of light weaving through dark corridors. You see the carved faces of saints whispering hope. You feel the water of the holy well flowing around your feet. You rest in the knowledge that healing can take many forms, and that even the humblest traveler can find grace along a winding path of faith. You rise before dawn with a chill in the air but determination in your mind. Today you will witness a practice that changed the fate of entire communities. You follow the local healer to a low stone cottage at the edge of town where chairs wait under a thatched roof. Inside, an elderly woman prepares a bowl of brisket from a mild smallpox patient. She dips a silver knife into the broth and draws it across her own arm, creating tiny pinpricks in the skin. You watch as she presses a small piece of scab into each incision. The patient before you is a child with bright eyes and a swollen forehead, but he does not cry. He only grips the chair edge and waits. This is variolation, a method brought from distant lands to induce a mild case of smallpox and grant lifelong immunity. You recall the tales of pilgrims returning from the Ottoman Empire, where they first observed this practice. The healer learned from those travelers. Over centuries, the technique spread quietly along trade routes and among curious scholars. You lean forward as the child sits patiently. The healer whispers encouragement and ties a bandage above each tiny wound. She dips a thread in rose water and ties it so gently you barely feel the silk touch your skin. The child smiles at you and says he hopes for a fever no worse than a summer chill. You nod and slip a cup of calendula tea into his hand. The bitter sweetness warms his belly and settles his nerves. Outside you feel the hum of sunrise as villagers gather. Many bring their own children, seeking protection against the dreadful pox. You see families trading baskets of eggs for a chance at immunity. The healer warns them of fever and aches to come, but promises that this trial will spare them a crueler fate. You sense fear and hope mingling in the crowd. A nobleman arrives with guarded curiosity. His daughter had fallen ill once and suffered scars that never healed. He watches as the healer repeats the process on a young woman with compass scars on her cheek. The healer draws scabs from a man who endured the mild variolation last year and mixes them with fresh snow to cleanse them. She explains that cleanliness reduces risk and that mild cases serve as best sources. The nobleman nods carefully, offering coins for the healer's continued wisdom. You wonder at the courage required to risk disease for the promise of safety. Weeks later, you return to the cottage. A gentle sigh passes through the straw mattresses as patients lie recovering. The child you saw emerges first. He brushes straw from his sleeves and grins at you. His skin bears just a few faint marks. His eyes shine with relief. The healer applauds his courage and offers him a sweet bun of honey and nutmeg. You congratulate him and send him home with a healing salve for his bites. A second patient, the nobleman's daughter, follows. She moves steadily, her cheeks smooth and unmarked. She curtsies before the healer and thanks her with silent tears. You realize that these scars of immunity are a small price for freedom from deadly pox. News of this practice spreads across the countryside. Healers from neighboring towns arrive to learn the method. They carry glass jars of scabs and notebooks filled with instructions. Some must return home with nothing but the memory of that day's labor. They speak of a new hope that can cross borders as swiftly as the winds. In time, a learned physician from the city writes letters describing variolation. He sends them to learned societies across the sea. In faraway England, a noblewoman hears the news. She lost a dear friend to smallpox and begs her physician to arrange a variolation for her own children. The physician hesitates but finally consents. He witnesses mild fevers and small scars but no deaths. Soon, members of the court follow suit. Variolation journeys across oceans with merchants, sailors, and scholars. It reaches the Americas, where colonists use it to spare settlements from lethal outbreaks. Indigenous healers learn the method and blend it with their own herbal poultices. The practice becomes woven into diverse medical traditions. Back at the cottage, you help prepare a fresh batch of scabs. You sift through dried material in a clay mortar until it becomes a fine powder. The healer adds a few drops of wine to moisten it. She divides the mixture into small pouches tied with linen. Each pouch will travel with a young apprentice to the next village. You seal your own pouch and slip it into your satchel. You feel the weight of something fragile and powerful. That evening, you walk home under a red sunset. You sense change in the air. You understand that the power to prevent disease once required burning, bloodletting, and bitter brews. Now it rests in a tiny scrap of skin and the courage of those willing to bear it. You think of the child who laughed at a fever and the noble daughter freed from scars. You think of the healer in her stone cottage who brought this cure to your home. You bow your head in gratitude. You know that modern medicine will someday render this practice obsolete, but today you honor it as a bridge between fear and relief. You rest with the knowledge that in the battle against smallpox, early inoculation lit a path that would someday lead to its eradication. You drift to sleep thinking of the journey that brought this cure across continents. You imagine a world where every brave soul who risked a mild fever created a shield for generations. You whisper thanks to the healers who carried scabs in leather pouches and to the patients who bore the mark of survival. You sleep peacefully, immune in spirit if not yet in body, dreaming of a future free of pox and full of hope. You rise in your own kitchen long before the baker's cart rattles down the street. The hearth fire glows low, casting orange flicker across rough wooden beams. You gather a handful of ingredients from your pantry and garden honey from your bees, mustard seeds from last summer's harvest, a bottle of red wine, a handful of rosemary sprigs, and a jar of vinegar. These are the tools of kitchen, alchemy, home remedies passed down by mothers and grandmothers when no physician lived nearby. You begin with a familiar cure for a sore throat. You pour a measure of wine into a small pot, add a spoonful of honey and a sprig of rosemary. You hold the mixture over the hearth until it warms but does not boil. The steam curls around your face, scented with sweet grape and pine. You take a sip and feel the warmth slide down your throat. The wine numbs the pain, while the honey coats aching tissue. The rosemary eases swelling. You know that monks use a similar blend in their infirmary, but here in your cottage, it brings comfort on a cold morning. Next, you take mustard seeds in a mortar. You pound them until they crack and release a sharp scent. You mix the ground seeds with warm water to form a paste. You spread it thinly on a cloth and apply it to the chest of someone struggling with congestion. The mustard plaster stings gently, drawing heat to the skin and opening the airways. The person coughs deeply as the rich aroma fills the room. Within minutes, their breathing eases, and a sense of relief settles over them. You turn to vinegar cures. You fill a basin with warm vinegar diluted in water. You place a cloth into it, wring it out, and tuck it around a feverish brow. The cool vinegar draws heat outward and steadies the pulse. You swap the cloth every few minutes, watching as the young child's face loses its flushed sheen. Vinegar is simple, plentiful, and surprisingly effective when heat threatens to boil over. From the garden, you cut sprigs of thyme, and thyme from the pantry, you crush a handful of dried leaves. You drip the essential oil onto a hot coal in a small brazier. The smoke rises blue and fragrant. You lead a wheezing patient to inhale the herb smoke lightly. The thyme loosens phlegm, soothes spasm, and guards against infection. They breathe deeply until their lungs open and the cough subsides. A neighbor complains of aching joints from a hard day's work. You combine melted lard with dried rue and a bit of salt. You stir until the mixture resembles a soft ointment and massage it into the sore knees and elbows. Rue warms the flesh, eases stiffness, and calms inflammation. By candlelight, you see the neighbor stand straighter and nod with appreciation. You remember your grandmother's remedy for stomach cramps. You slice a raw onion and sprinkle salt on the rings. You let them sit until they soften and release juice. Then you drain away excess liquid and rub the onion rings gently across the abdomen. The onion's pungent juices draw out pain and calm cramps with surprising gentleness. You recall how your mother once used that cure on you during childhood illnesses and marvel at its enduring power. The baker's boy arrives with fresh loaves. You break off a hunk of crusty bread and soak it in warm chicken broth. You add a swirl of butter and a pinch of sage. You bring the bowl to someone who has lost their appetite. The simple soup nourishes without overwhelming the stomach. You watch them swallow each spoonful as color returns to their cheeks. Kitchen alchemy can be as vital as any potion in a glass vial. A friend comes seeking relief for a stubborn skin rash. You mix curds of fresh cheese with a mashed scrap of plantain leaf. The plantain's soothing properties combine with the cheese's mild acidity to create a cooling poultice. You apply the paste to the rash and secure it with clean linen. The friend sighs in relief as the itching fades. You remind them to keep the skin clean and to change the poultice daily. As dusk falls, you prepare a final remedy. You chop garlic cloves and bruise them in a mortar. You add a little oil to carry the essence. Then you pour the mixture into a clay jar and seal it. Visitors rub this garlic oil behind their ears to ward off plague or carry a drop beneath their tongue at the first sign of chills. The pungent aroma is harsh, but many swear by its power to chase away illness before it takes hold. You tidy your kitchen and set jars of mustard paste, honey wine, and garlic oil on the shelf. You feel a quiet pride in these simple cures. No physician could offer something more direct than the fruits of your pantry and garden. In every pot and pouch you see centuries of wisdom, the stubborn ingenuity of people who turned ordinary foods into healing wonders. That night you dream of simmering broths and steaming vats of herbal elixir. You hear your grandmother's voice urging you to trust the gifts of the hearth. You wake with the scent of thyme and onion lingering in your mind. You rise before dawn once more, ready to blend and stir whatever kitchen alchemy will bring relief to body and spirit in a world where home remedies held the power of miracle. You wake before dawn and feel the first chill of a world without modern comforts. You remember the soothing hum of air conditioning, the gentle drip of a shower, the sterile click of a syringe delivering pain relief. Now imagine a time when every cure felt like a gamble, when the only tools were knives, leeches, hot irons, or dusty powders ground from bones 1,000 years old. You think you are brave enough to endure bloodletting and boiling oils and leech gardens. You might be wrong. Medieval medicine asked more of you than simply to surrender a vial of blood or swallow a bitter pill. It demanded that you put faith in the unseen balance of humors that lived inside you. Too much blood meant fever and delirium. Too little meant fainting and despair. A barber surgeon could drain you twice and leave you lighter in body but hollow in spirit. You would wake from sleep with a dizziness that felt like your mind had been emptied. You would swallow more vinegar water than you ever dreamed of tasting. Your gums would bleed and your lips crack, and you would still ask for more. Variolation meant that you or your child volunteered to catch a mild case of smallpox. You agreed to let someone scrape scabs from a pox patient and rub them into a fresh wound. The thought makes you shiver. It was not a vaccine as you know it, but a gamble that your own immune fire would burn brighter than the disease. Sometimes it worked. Many times it killed. You would find yourself weak for weeks or dead within days. Your only comfort would be that those who survived were spared a crueler fate. Would you risk your child on such odds? Your modern self would think twice. Trepanning drilled holes in skulls to release evil spirits. You picture a hot awl tapped by a mallet on your bare head. You taste the dust of bone as it falls into your hair. You feel the physician's calloused hand grip the handle of a bronze crown until it cuts through your skull in a precise circle. You cannot imagine how you would hold still as your skull opened and spirits or blood or humors poured out. Yet medieval survivors claimed relief from headaches and madness after one of these surgeries. They called it a miracle. Could you trust your own fate to a blade and lack of anesthesia? Leech therapy meant tiny bloodsuckers attached to your flesh at the order of a monastic surgeon. Their bite feels like a tiny pinch. Then they swell like living beads, drawing out bad humor until they fall away. You imagine hours spent waiting for them to feed, your skin marked by dozens of tiny scars. You would shuffle home with soaked bandages. You would sleep with the memory of wet flesh and whispering insects under your pillow. Would you trade that discomfort for a promise of eased fever? Herbal elixirs brewed by monks in candlelit cloisters offered comforting aromas, rose petals steeped in vinegar to calm the heart, violets macerated into wine to ease fevered cheeks, lavender distilled into water to soothe frayed nerves. You imagine inhaling those scents and savoring a cup of lavender tea in a quiet garden. Yet you would also measure your dose by eyesight. No milligram scales or sterile conditions. You might sip too much or too little. You might mistake poisonous plants for harmless ones. And every sip carried both promise and peril. Donkey dung poultices sound grotesque. You spread the rancid paste on sores, convinced that foul smells would draw out toxins. You choke on the stench and taste earth on your tongue. You might contract more infection than you cure. You wonder whether faith alone cured the wound, or whether the plant fibers beneath saved your flesh. Would you smear your own sores with dung if you believed it could save your life? Isolation houses and quarantine meant being locked away from your family in cold stone huts. Guards barred your door. Your only company was the crackling straw beneath your feet and the distant moans of others trapped like you. Pilgrims brought you water through a small hatch. Monks visited at dawn to pray over you. Sometimes prayer cured as much as any salve, but you would also face loneliness, fear, and the knowledge that death might sneak in and claim you without farewell. Could you bear that? Pilgrimages and relics invited faith to perform miracles. You might walk for days barefoot to a shrine of a saint, hoping a drop of holy water or a touch of a relic would heal a lifelong malady. The journey itself tested your resolve. You would face hunger, thirst, and bandits. Then, in a crowded chapel, you pressed your forehead to a piece of bone encased in silver and prayed for relief. Some returned healed. Others collapsed outside, crushed by hope. Would you walk that road? Variolation evolved into vaccination centuries later, but in medieval times it was a secret science. Letters passed quietly between courts. Royal families risked their heirs on experimental cures. Entire villages watched as men bled children with scabs in their arms. Rumors of death spread faster than news of salvation. You would face scorn or praise, depending on the outcome. Would you stand in line to test fate? By part 12, you see a pattern. Medieval medicine demanded courage beyond the physical. It required faith, optimism, and willingness to endure discomfort without guarantee of reward. Each cure asked you to believe in unseen balances, to surrender comfort, to trust that a blade or a worm could bring relief. You would bleed and blister and shiver and pray. You would taste vinegar and bitter mustard and charcoal. You would watch instruments catch glints of torchlight and hold your breath as bone dust fell. Your modern self would balk. You expect safety protocols, sterility, informed consent. We have pills we swallow without flinching. We heal wounds with antiseptic wipes, not dung poultices. We vaccinate with clean needles, not scab scratches. We have therapists and scanners for madness, not trepanning rings. And yet without those early experiments with bloodletting leeches, spores and relics, civilization might never have learned how to heal. There is reward in every curiosity. People survived plague with quarantine, pox with variolation, madness with trepanning. Knees once swollen found relief from centipedes and mugs of warm mustard. A sick child found peace by drinking rose water and ginger tisanes. These remedies show human ingenuity, striving to save life with whatever tools were at hand. You would never survive medieval medicine unchanged. You would emerge, transformed, your faith tested, your nerves frayed, your body marked by scars of hope. You would gain stories of survival but carry constant memories of pain. You would value every modern pill and every sterile bandage. You would wonder how your ancestors found courage in the face of ignorance. In the end, you respect the daring of those who endured. Their curious cures paved the way for tomorrow's science. They mixed faith and trial in a crucible of need. They shaped medicine one odd practice at a time. You step back from history with gratitude for their grit and for the gifts of modern care they inspired. Your modern self may never sign up for bloodletting or donkey dung, for leeches or torture of trepanning, but you will honor the determination of those who did, because they fought disease with hope and risked everything for the chance to live, and for that alone, you carry their legacy forward.